Alrighty, happy Thursday to you. If you're here and I didn't mark you when you came in, let me know. But I don't see Hope yet. I don't see Angel yet. Alexa. Michael. Natalie R. Damien. Hannah Wiseman. Okay. All right. So good Thursday to you. We are to basically module 14. So we will get set with that. From your Canvas page, go ahead and go to World History. Click on modules and go down to, as I said, module 14. We'll review real quick what we talked about in terms of spheres of influence. In China last week, United States and Latin America and South America as well. We'll review that quick, and then we'll talk about basically the causes of World War I today. So how does World War I, or as it was referred to until really World War II, the Great War. So go ahead and get to module 14. All right. So real quick, last week we looked at imperialism basically continued, right? So imperialism starts in the continent of Africa, moves to the Middle East, moves to Southeast Asia, and then moved to China. So we looked at the spheres of influence. One of your assignments was the map of the different spheres from those European countries during that time period. So you're looking in the 1800s into the early 1900s. We looked at United States, specifically the Monroe Doctrine from the middle of the 1800s, the Roosevelt Corollary on top of that in terms of basically we'll be the police for this hemisphere. So we're talking The United States really wanted to keep European countries out of the area because they saw what had happened to Africa, to India, to China, places around the world when these industrialized countries are looking for raw materials and markets for their good. So that's going to cause a couple of things that will lead to the Great War. And as I said, World War I isn't really referenced as World War I until World War II, which references the Great War. So some of the causes here, let me reset this for you. Okay, so during the late 1800s into the early 1900s, you have some empires that come to be very powerful in the world. Germany, France, Russia, and Austria-Hungary specifically. Each of these empires sought land and security. More land that they had, the more access they had, and a bigger buffer between those other countries in the area. So really, when you look at Europe, you could put Europe easily inside our country in terms of land area. They also wanted to become more powerful. Everybody wanted to be Britain, right? Britain had colonies across the world. And so what these countries do, especially after they saw the success that they had in defeating Napoleon when they joined together, is they basically create an alliance system. And so they create an alliance system because we have had for about 100 years countries jockeying for position, right? We remember how they just divided up Africa. We saw what happened with the spheres of influence in China in the late 1800s. And so these countries start coming to secret agreements on protecting each other. So Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy form what's known as the Triple Alliance. And they basically promise to help each other in the event that anything were to happen militarily. France, Russia, and Great Britain, worried about Germany, Austria, and Hungary, basically form the Triple Entente. And these are secret agreements in which they agree to help each other if they're attacked by another country. The first sort of area that becomes a big place of contention is the Balkan Peninsula. So this is the area of Greece, formerly to a little bit to the east where you now have Turkey, but you have the Ottoman Empire. So you're looking at Greece, Albania, Romania, Bulgaria, those areas, Montenegro, Serbia, Bosnia, all of those areas in southeast part of Europe. There are a number of border disputes. There are a number of interests based on the number of ethnicities that you have in that area, and then ambitions of these empires, right, that want to control more land, and more specifically, they want to have a warm water port, right, because naval power is now becoming more and more important as the world has gotten wider. We know that in the early 1900s, you have the Panama Canal finished, which is basically a trade route, but that also allows for fast movement of goods. The Serbians wanted the area of Bosnia controlled by the Austrian-Hungarian Empire because it would give them access to the sea. And so when you look at that map, let me show you here. Let me bring this up because you'll be able to see it a little bit better. This is close enough. This is an older one that I'd use for something else. But basically what you're looking at here, right? So when you look at this, let me draw this out so you can kind of see. This is the German Empire here. This is the Russian Empire here, all right? And you've got Austria-Hungary basically controlling this area here. And then you have Bosnia and Serbia, right, basically right here, right next to each other, okay? And so obviously, right, when you look at the Serbs wanted to get access through Albania or through Montenegro to get access to the sea. right? This country here is landlocked. This is what will become Turkey. That was usually the Ottoman Empire until then. This is Greece here. And obviously this is Italy. So that was the big concern in this part of the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, in terms of being able to do something about getting access to that. And they are going to battle over that. All right. So let me reset this as well, just in case it didn't show. So some of the things that you need to keep in mind during the lead up here to World War I in 1914 is that this alliance system, this network of treaties, agreements, and ententes were negotiated prior to the start of the war. And that's why when we have the assassination of the Archduke and his wife, you're going to have all of these secret treaties come about when there is going to be an attack from one country on another, and it basically brings in 6 to 8 countries at one time to fight each other. You also have, during this time period, especially during colonialization, where monarchies are diminishing and people have more of a sense of nationality and pride that they are Serbian now, not part of the Serbian monarchy. And same thing that you saw in France, right? People see themselves as French, not as a subject of King Louis or Marie Antoinette, who was the queen, etc. So national tensions and rivalries, right, make these alliances a common feature in Europe, specifically after what Napoleon had done, because people had come to the aid of other countries to defeat Napoleon's military advances. Many of the alliances were negotiated in secret, as I said. Those secret clauses basically bound one country to protect another if they were attacked. The Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy, formed basically one side of what is going to be World War I, the Central Powers. Britain, France, and Russia are going to join together and form the Allies, or what we would consider the Allies. So, 3 biggest reasons that you're going to have for this great war, and that's going to be World War I when we have World War II in 1939, when Hitler invades Poland on September 1st of 39, is going to be militarism. During the Industrial Revolution with these machines, and then going from steam power to coal power, industrialized nations will take that technology and basically build up great military machines. Germany was one of the most effective to do that in the early 1900s. So countries have built bigger and better militaries over the last 20 to 30 years. Leads to competition between countries, because when they see the Germans building this, because the Germans used basically the North Atlantic up on their northern coast to build this navy, and the British and the French and anybody in that area could see that with some reconnaissance. And so that causes Britain and France to build up their militaries, which causes Austria-Hungary, right, because of Napoleon in the past with France, to build up their military. Then the Italians do the same. Generally, when you have this happen, you have a number of countries building up a military in which they're more likely to use that to settle their disputes. Second cause for this war is going to be imperialism, right? It was this whole race to get markets, to get raw materials, to be the first to claim land in Africa, to be the first to claim land in India and Southeast Asia, have your sphere of influence in China. The United States saying, hey, you're not welcome in this hemisphere, so you're going to have to stay out of Latin America. The Spanish are forced out of Cuba and Puerto Rico. So imperialism also creates a lot of hostility. You want to be the one country that controls another part of the world. You don't want to be the part of the people, or be part of a people that are controlled by another country. Those people that are controlled generally want their freedom. And generally, during this time period, you have Darwin's theories about basically the strongest survive. And so they extrapolate that from sort of the scientific realm also to the military and political realm. right? If we're the strongest, biggest, best military, army, navy in the world, nobody can tell us what to do. We'll make the rules. We'll take whatever land we want, etc. And then you have this nationalism come about. And this was one of the effects of Napoleon. You have pride in one's country. When you stop Napoleon's advances, right, you felt part of that. People wanted to defend their country. And then the idea of Darwin and the strongest will survive is pretty paramount. You have to be strong to survive what is going to happen. And then the last thing, most of you know this from your time younger in junior high or even elementary school, you have the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. So here's a couple of slides I put together for you, just in case you don't remember, but the Archduke, right, is the heir to the throne, basically in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and he and his wife Sophie go and visit one of their colonies to the south in Sarajevo, and is ended up shot. So Gavrilo Princip is the shooter who shoots both the Archduke and his wife. And basically what they did was they went to this area sort of as a visit. There is a path, and that path was printed in the newspaper before the day of the ceremony. So there was going to be this big luncheon around noon, and in the morning there was this motorcade. So obviously looking back, right, in 1914, you're not going to have cars that have enclosed areas, right? Similar to why Kennedy was assassinated, right? Kennedy's in a limousine with the top down, right? They'll never let that. So in fact, there's no airflow. So the presidents of the United States now travel in a vehicle that the windows won't be allowed to go down. They won't let the windows go down. So you have this situation, and basically there was a group of 7 or 8 with Princip that had planned along this route basically to use grenades, stop the motorcade, and basically kill them with gunshots or grenades. The problem is along the parade route, one of the grenades went off too early. Another grenade basically was a dud and didn't go off. And so they had sped away, and nobody in the royal car had been injured. And so what happens is Princip thinks that they have failed. So he wanders the streets and finds a cafe and basically is like, what do I do now, right? We failed, it didn't work. This here is the gun that he used to shoot them. There is a museum in Sarajevo that has what the Archduke was wearing at the time of his assassination. And so here you can see, let me format to a different color. You can see it there. This is all in your module too, so if you wanted to, you could. But basically right here, that's all blood. All of those mustard stains 106 years later are blood stains. And so that is what he was wearing when he was shot and killed. There is a black and white picture. You can see that taken at the time. The blood is a lot more visible, shall we say. So as with most assassinations, these things are generally circumstance, a little bit of luck if you are the person trying to commit the murder, and then bad luck if you're the one on the receiving end. So after the initial attempt at the assassination had failed, they basically went back to City Hall in Sarajevo. And the Archduke obviously was upset. You know, I thought the people here would love me. What is going on? And then they find out that in the back of the motorcade where the grenade went off early, that there were some soldiers who were injured in protecting the Archduke. And so he felt it was his duty to go to the hospital and thank them for basically providing safety in this assassination attempt. As fate has it, his driver gets lost going from City Hall to the hospital. turns on a side road that actually is a dead end, and it's the same road that Princep had gone into a deli to get a bite to eat. Princep walks out of the deli. The driver who had hit the dead end had tried to put the car in reverse, and at these early stages of automobiles, it was not that very easy. Princep can't believe that the Archduke is right there, basically walks right up to the side of the car and fires bullets into the Archduke and into his wife. Here they are. They have captured Princep right away because there were a couple of cars in that, and they basically get out of him, and they beat him up pretty good, but they get out of him the rest of the people that were responsible for the assassination. Princep is actually not of age, and so he's going to be sentenced to a jail term, actually dies in jail of tuberculosis. 4 or 5 of the others are old enough of age, adults considered at the time, and they are going to be executed for what they did. And then this is the funeral of the Archduke and his wife. She was actually pregnant at the time of the murder. And so what you have, obviously, is a bunch of bad luck, but that one incident, right, that one incident is going to cause everybody to start fighting. And so obviously the Austrian-Hungarians, when the heir to their throne is assassinated in a foreign country, are going to be very upset. And so they're going to declare war about a month later. When they declare war, then the other countries who had had treaties and ententes and these secret deals are all going to join together, and pretty much you've got a world war, and that's what's going to happen. All right, quickly, let me show you a synopsis of what we talked about: militarism, imperialism, nationalism, and then this assassination attempt. So I'll show this to you. Oops, I'm going to share my screen or you won't see it. You won't see a stinking thing.
Hey there, students. I'm going to go ahead and start belting out a lecture series that I probably should have done a long time ago. I'm going to get into World War I, and in this lecture, I'm going to focus on the causes of World War I, and in other lectures, I'll go into the weaponry, the psychological toll, some of the poetry and art, and of course, the Paris Peace Conference. But let's go ahead and start with the causes. Now, World War I ran from 1914 to 1918, and in the course of this 4-year period, 38 million casualties, around 10 million of those deaths. Just a level of destruction unheard of in history up to that point. And we ask ourselves, what started this mess? How did Europe go from 99 years of relative peace between the Napoleonic Wars and World War I into this war that was beyond anything that they'd ever seen, the war to end all wars, so to speak? Little did they know. Most people explain the causes of World War I by breaking them into 4 parts, going over the so-called main causes, which are militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And that's the framework through which I'm going to explain the causes to you. Now, first of all, let's start with militarism. And this goes to the Anglo-German arms race. It's really the biggest expression of this pre-World War I militarism, starting with the HMS Dreadnought. That is quite a name, Dreadnought. And you already know this is something big, even compared to all of these other ship names: the Arrogant, the Gladiator, the Unbeaten, Unbending, Unbroken, Undaunted, Valiant, Vampire, Vanquisher, Vehement, Vengeance, Victory. Lots of these there, and that's only a few of them. The Dreadnought. That's just, wow, okay? Like, this better be good. This has got to be a big ship. And sure enough, it was. This thing loaded with 12-inch guns. That's like 12 inches in diameter as far as the shells that this thing would put out. And here is the deck of the Dreadnought. At least part of that's the deck, and you can see a cross section and all of that kind of stuff. And you see all of these different gun placements. It is unreal. This is beyond anything that had ever been made before. You see that the Industrial Revolution has been fully realized. You've got a fully automated loading mechanism. You see that sailor there that is just kind of like, all right, I'm just sort of watching this thing do its thing. And this is a killing machine. So much that it renders every other ship ever made obsolete. And what's important to note here is that Britain had had all of this naval superiority in the 19th century, but now that they've made this ship to end all ships, so to speak, now we're starting over at one. And if someone wanted to catch up, they could. Let's go ahead and look at this data here. We look at 1870 and 1913, and we look at the manufacturing capacity of westernized nations. Now, in 1870, of course, the UK, that being Britain, etc., being the first to start the Industrial Revolution, they were still ahead. Behind them, the United States, and then behind them, Germany. Fast forward to 1913. Now we see that, whoa, the U.S., America, woo! Yeah. All right, more than Germany and the UK combined. But keep in mind that Americans are kind of still on that Washingtonian, Jeffersonian kick, sort of staying out of this thing, at least at the beginning. And when we look here, we see that in the intervening years between 1870 and 1913, Germany has surpassed the UK in manufacturing capacity. Remember in my lectures on German unification, how I noted that the unification of Germany fundamentally altered the balance of power. Now that Germany can out-manufacture Britain, there's nothing saying that they can't out-navy the British. And that is going to be the impetus for this arms race that perhaps we can catch up. And then relations between Germany and Britain weren't going so well anyway. Kaiser Wilhelm II, whom the British sometimes called Kaiser Bill. And Kaiser Bill thought, well, I'm just going to give an interview to the Daily Telegraph, which is still a major newspaper in the UK today. And I'm going to go ahead and try to smooth over Anglo-German relations. Well, he does about the opposite. First of all, somebody asked him something to the effect of, hey, why all this military buildup? Are you trying to compete with the British? And he's like, well, yeah, what else would I be trying to do? And that's not really what the British wanted to hear. And then instead of being cool about it when he's asked, hey, what about all this distrust between the UK and Germany? Instead of saying, hey, it's cool, man, it's just a misunderstanding, he says, you Brits are about as mad as a bunch of March hares. You are just crazy, all right? This is just crazy stuff. And so now the British get in their biggest paper, one of the biggest papers, the Kaiser of Germany, who's saying that y'all are a bunch of crazy people. And of course, we're building up our military to compete with y'all. And this really did not go so well. So when you think, oh, I'm going to give an interview to smooth this over, doesn't always have the intended consequence. And then, of course, there are Franco-German tensions. When we look at the Franco-Prussian War and everything that led up to that, and the aftermath, where the Germans proclaimed their empire right there in the French Hall of Mirrors. They exacted reparations from the French after the Franco-Prussian War, and then they took the territory of Alsace-Lorraine from the French. So keep in mind, it's not just the British and the Germans. There's a lot of tension between the British and the French. Well, of course, but the French and the Germans as well. Three nationalities that don't really like each other, except that Britain and France are going to be on the same side during this war. Next, we move on to the alliance system. Now, the alliance system was the byproduct of Bismarck. Bismarck, who was pretty much a foreign policy genius for the most part, and what Bismarck thought that he was going to do was to forge a system of alliances which would actually prevent wars. This is kind of a recipe for peace and a recipe for maintaining the balance of power through alliances. He made alliances with Austria-Hungary and with Italy, and then France and the UK and Russia make alliances with each other. You've got two major alliances here. First of all, the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, which is then going to turncoat during the war, but then the Ottoman Empire will join the Central Powers. So for the purposes of the war, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. And then the so-called triple entente. Entente is a French word meaning something to the effect of understanding. The United Kingdom, Britain, aka France, and Russia. And the objective, remember, is peace. That Bismarck felt like the objective here is not to go to war. That if we have this whole pile-up effect or something like that, that look, if you mess with this one, you mess with me. If you mess with that one, you mess with me. I mess with you. You really don't want to get into a fight. Austria is thinking about, ooh, let me pick on little Serbia and take Serbia's lunch money or something like that. Russia's like, yes! And that's like, wow, okay, like, Russians get like that? No. And then the Germans might get involved, and then the French and the British and all that kind of stuff. And you think about it, and you think, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to get into this big fight with a whole bunch of people, rather than just over picking on this one individual nation. And the thing about the alliance system is that it works until it doesn't. Kind of like in a baseball game or something like that, where the pitcher gets the batter, and then they get the fight, and then it all piles up. Gets out of hand. It's almost like nuclear war and mutually assured destruction. That works. It's worked so far. Until it doesn't. We move on to imperialism, which I'm not going to stress a whole lot, but I do want you to think about imperialism in terms of national rivalry going global, whether it's the scramble for Africa, whether it's imperialism in Asia or in the Pacific Islands. What this does is it gives European nations another forum in which to compete, and this is going to escalate those national rivalries. And beyond that, I'm not really going to stress imperialism as a factor. Then there's nationalism, this whole idea of self-determination on the basis of ethnicity, that we as a people should be able to form our own country and associate with each other, whether it is united like Germany and Italy, or whether it is divided like a lot of folks in the Balkans. Nationalism is about determining your own course of action for your own ethnicity. And this is where we have to turn our attention to the Balkan Peninsula, which includes lots of countries forming Yugoslavia, Romania, Greece, even a little bit of Turkey. But where we're really going to focus on is the so-called former Yugoslavia, these countries Yugoslavia. I mean, after all, they're all Yugoslavs, right? That's not really how it works. You've got Slovenians, Macedonians, Serbs, Croatians, all of these other people, Bosnians. You've got a lot of different people that don't play well with each other. In fact, with all of the conquests ranging from the Byzantines to the Ottomans to the Habsburgs, and all of these different groups who have different languages, different religions, different cultures. These people don't play well with each other. In fact, they are really fond of killing each other. Now, Miss Snyder went out to Croatia and the Balkans and all that kind of stuff over the summer. She seemed to be having a good enough time. But I don't want to go out there. That's just completely people who like to kill each other. For me to go out there and be a part of that and all that kind of stuff. She goes to Israel and all kinds of dangerous places like that too. So she can have that. I'll just say right here in America. And it looks peaceful enough. It's like, oh, waterfalls and that kind of stuff. But nobody knows about that. Okay, that is a tip. And this used to be the National Library in the 1990s. So they just gutted that thing. And there's a cellist decided to play there in the National Library. So don't underestimate these people. Don't feel too safe over there because they're very fond of killing each other. I do not offend anybody over there if they're watching in former Yugoslavia. That is not my intent. In fact, if you are offended, I'm happy that you're allowed to be offended because that means that somebody's going to kill you. It's very quiet over there. Maybe one day, because a lot of Slavic peoples. We talk about Slavic peoples, we're talking about the Russians, the Poles, and then all of these other people live here in the Balkans who share language groupings, who share the Orthodox religion. A lot of these Slavs share a lot of elements of culture with Russia. And Russia has always taken an interest in this area. So it's very important to note these balance of power considerations. When you look at Serbia, for example, it is there
All right. So when, and I said, as I said, it's going to take about a month, but basically when Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, the Russians at that time declare war on the Austrian-Hungarians because of this, because they had a treaty with them. Then Germany declares war on Russia, then France and Britain get in, and you have the Great War as it becomes known. So all of these things lead to this war, all right, lead to this war. So a couple of things, and let me bring this up. On Monday, let me get to the right module. On Monday, we had the module 12 quiz over imperialism show up in Aries, and that's still available till tomorrow. Let me make that a different color. It's kind of hard to see. That'll be available until tomorrow at 3:15. So that started showing up in Aries on Monday. If you hadn't taken that 15-question quiz, it's still available. Last week, we took a look at imperialism in China, Latin America, and South America. Those things are going to be due next Monday. So the map of China and its spheres of influence from these European countries, along with Russia and Japan, which are in Asia. The 3 or 4 questions in TCI, actually it's a set of 6. There's 3 before and 3 after picture questions that they want you to look at in a table. And then the 21 question quiz are all due Monday the 23rd. What we've talked about today in terms of the causes of World War I will not be due until November 30th. So quite a few days from them, 11. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So a couple of you had mentioned, and let me reset this so I can show you, but a couple of you had mentioned the audio broke up a little bit. The notes that we've gone over are in this module. So the causes about the notes are available here. We also have the PowerPoint and the assassination. So if you want to look at that PowerPoint again, that's available as well. And then Mr. Ritchie's causes video, when he talks about militarism, nationalism, imperialism, the things that we had talked about is available there to you as well. If you want an early start on the TCI questions, there's 4 questions. There's a map that has 22 identifications that you need to know. This is pre-World War I. And then the review game is available until November 30th. You can play that as many times as you want. And then there is a quiz on the causes of World War I. I think that's